The call. He could feel it, the call to war. He knew it was time to awake the elders of the high councils together against the Archon. For when the others come, there will be a major shift with other humans fluent with the ways of the world through means as a digital simulation within theirs. There is no telling of the manner of skill these interdimensional humans. They could have long played games in hundreds of realities before coming to this one. They could simply be bored of their reality and want to create a new world and order here. Everyone's preparing for the coming of star magic, harbouring their skills and abilities, practicing daily, gathering goods and items. The look in everyone's face is telling of their anguish to meet the humans from the true reality that ours exists within, as the prophecy goes. They don't want to lose the world to the other world, as they are at a point where heliocentrism is still the norm and rampant industrializations are everywhere, so everyone is apt to defend their culture and way. He got up, slightly, leaning against pillows up against the wall. His drone was just looking at him, probably wondering what it is today. The drone didn't mind being left there all day, as its consciousness travelled wherever with Ain through a digital chip that hung from his neck. Ain spoke to the beta drone. I have to begin uniting the elders. I fear that the oncomers will bring great destruction with being biased by their world. The drone didn't say anything. Its light, that is, its cyclopean eye, just flashed a few times, as if to say what? Just like a dog. The drones don't ever have much to say about the ways of war, despite the fact they are built to fight. Ain insisted. Well, what do you think? The drone aptly replied. I think that they created this world. Ain drew back because he could sense that he was the creator of the world. He wondered if he could see the creator when people started coming to this reality. But this world was created to educate them. I know, Ain said. He said with a smile, so we better stay awake from it. He picked up his rifle that was on his workbench at the end of his bed that was parallel with the wall. It was in good condition. He had made some repairs and adjustments to it recently. He saddled it onto his back with the strap. He was ready to go. He left after some hand signs made for GeoCity. Instantly he was at the main market of GeoCity. Great trees hundreds of meters tall reached up. There were buildings on all of the branches and burrows into the trees lit for homes. Great curving staircases were along the trunks for people to access higher levels. The trees tower far above Ain and the market area. It was bustling. There were all sorts of beasts everywhere, typical for the Earth City. A great building was in the center of a ring of trees. It was pyramidal and has 3 tall towers on either side of it. This overlooked the market area. Below GeoCity was another city part that was entirely underground, full of caverns that led to homes cleft deep within the stone. The buildings in GeoCity were quite medieval looking, though they were equipped with technology. There were great 2-legged birds called dukes walking around and tied to poles and fences. Feathery birds with a big beak and canny face. Large eyes as well as large fires to take travellers around. Giant wolves walking around, one the size of the local pub just walking around. Tricity, the name of the tavern in the market area, named after Tree City and the idea that Earth is third dimensional, a creationist reality, reflective of the above area and below area of GeoCity. Ain needed to head to the council chambers at the top of the Capitol building. He thought he'd get a duke, as he could only teleport to where he'd been before, or instead into the perceivable distance, with mana willing, so he thought he may as well ride and conserve mana. Hey, Ain said to the duke salesman, I want to get a duke. He paid a crystal and then got up on the duke and it almost neighed, but it wouldn't neigh, it's a duke. It let out some scream and then it started running. Ain held on the best he could. He rocked up and down. He quickly darted up toward the building housing the council. When he reached the top, he noticed that the building on top of the trapezoidal pyramid was a ring of trees with a space at the front for an entrance. He went inside and saw all the members of the council sitting around a pond. Around the edges of the pond, the grass flowed heavy into it. There were all sorts of bugs fluttering about, and spores in the air lit by the few strands of sunlight coming through all the trees above. They welcomed him. The aura of colours was amazing. The rich deep green of the grass, the sparkling blue of the pond, contrasted to the dark trunks of the ring of trees encasing the area. He greeted them. "Hey, I've come to speak to you about your allegiance against the Archon and not the Light Stars." They listened intently. They spoke about how they wouldn't want the end of terraformation just yet, but they know they cannot attack the Light Stars in case they are needed to stop the Archon and their terraformation when it gets too much. Great trees are being grown and magic is being restored. They need not stop the terraformation, however the Light Stars will destroy themselves against the Archon if others choose not to help. They just hope the Archon are for now undefeatable. They agreed to help in plight against the Archon. Aim was sitting by the pond staring into. He wondered what was to come. He had to go to the other councils. He cast some hand signs, then left for Pyrodome. It was hot there, desert sand encapsulating a volcanic mountain range. Pyrodome is built into the largest volcanic mountain of the range, but it wasn't the biggest mountain. Behind it was Archangeles, Fire Mountain. Fire drakes occupied those mountains, but they leave the people of Pyrodome alone, untamable, vicious creatures that exist in symbionts with the natural happenings of Pyrodome. Thus they leave the people alone, but they typically dwell on the far side of the mountain so their presence goes unnoticed. The same slithering goes on in Pyrodome, full of hotheads. The industry of combustion still exists there. They make all manner of things such as races, jet planes, machines for war. He was at the entrance of Pyrodome, the walls connecting to the sides in the valley of the mountain. In the middle was the main gate. It was a tall entrance with an arched top. Next to either side of it were holes in the wall of the same size as the entrance that two giant alpha drones stood in. One of the robots turned its head at Ain, as if to welcome him, but remained in posture. There were massive fighters, guardians of the wall. Within were all steampunk-looking buildings, pipes with steam, sandstone buildings with dome roofs. Ain walked through and saw people doing things, dogs in the alleys, brazen fruit being sold next to drinks. He needed to head to the main council building. It was into the mountain. He entered through a massive walkways carved through the mountain stone. Inside the mountain were bubbling lakes of lava with houses everywhere. The houses were all on metal stilts and had similar staircases. Most of the buildings were high above the lava and built into the walls. He could see the Capitol building. All there really was of it was massive archways for balcony entrances. The building was carved into the mountain. A red glow from the lava illuminated everything. It was hot, as it was obvious that all buildings inside were cooled with air conditioning. He continued up towards the council building. He climbed a set of staircases that ran up to the centre of the front balcony. When he reached the top of the stairs, he saw how they went down the other side. He stepped toward the main balcony area. The decorating on the column arches were amazing. The soft reverberating glow of the lava ceased almost completely when he went inside. Inside the room of columns was in the centre of it an area without columns that had a fireplace in the centre of it with benches around it. There was no one there. He hurried on. He eventually came to the other side of the room with all the columns and went through an arch cut in the wall for a doorway. On the other side was a cylindrical room with a flat roof. There was a fireplace in centre and several ascending rings of benches around the big fireplace. This was the council room. It was full of people sitting down discussing things. He went and talked to them about the same situation involving the Light Stars or the Archon, as he discussed with the Council of Geocity. They were in agreement. They thought the Archon would not be beat as of yet. Maybe in time, when they have sided with these other humans and grown proficient with star magic, would they be able to defeat the Archon. They began discussing the fire drakes. "So how come you don't have a problem with the fire drakes?" Ain said. "Well, we just aren't bothered by them. We hardly ever see them except for when they fly around Angelus Mountain," the leader of the council, Arrakis, said. He was a bold man, old though very skilled with fire magic, endowed in maroon robes with red and black trimming. He was. They talked about flying them, but they are not agreeable to that whatsoever. They stay right away from humans, almost as if they were beyond them. He thanked them for their agreement and left. As he entered back toward the balcony, the red glow and warmth of the lava returned. It flows through some opening and pools at the base of the mountain for a little while before continuing. He noticed that there were kids on small races hanging about the balcony outside the columns. He exited through the columns and chatted with them. They were going on about how they were going to be going for a race across the dunes soon. There was plenty of room as it was a spacious megalithic structure. He asked if they would take him outside, and he hopped on and rode out to the front gate. Here he began to grow tired and knew he ought to sleep or to teleporting, and the day was drawing to an end. He went back home, and as he laid upon his bed, he thought that maybe the Archon wouldn't be able to be defeated, and we would just be dying a lot for no reason. But he knew that the prophecy was meant for the time against the Archon, given the new magic and the coming of skilled warriors. If we didn't try, then there could be too much terraformation that humans struggle to exist, and then there wouldn't be the ability to contravene back power. And we could exist in dark slavery forever because of too much magic. It's probably what the Archon represent, too much magic. Their alienoid shape, slit reptilic eyes, two-finger and thumb hands, and most importantly, and particularly, their pronged spike that protrude from the back of their torso that act like a secondary set of upper limbs. He thought it best to make war instead of staying idle. It was cold. It's like he was being called by the Archon through thinking about them. He felt shivers all across his body. He just turned to be more comfortable, the covers tightly wrapped over him. He awoke and thought, as the sun pierced through the blinds, that he was rejuvenated from all the teleporting. It was dark magic, in which Aim was efficient using, as per his ability to be the best seer. He thought he'd best go to Aeronown and Aquid. He went to Aeronown first, in the highest mountains of the world, in the Himalayan region, where tall temple-like buildings is the construct for the city. Magnificent towering walls bordered the elevated city. The city existed on a plateau side of a massive mountain. The towers reigned over the whole area. The towers were built very close to another so that no part of the wall was unwatched. He was at the main area of the city. A fountain lay bubbling in the centre. Statues of men fighting beasts in the centre of it. Some wrestled with bulls, others fought back lions, while some protect sheep from wolves. People walked about, going in and out of arched underpasses that went under the first story of the buildings. The upstairs area of buildings rolled out onto the street, yet the base part of their building had towering temple-like columns holding them up. He began to ascend a large series of steps that go up the mountain to the council section of the city. Below him he could see the city and the descent from all the mountains. He thought it looked petrifying. As he couldn't fly, like others around doing so, through changing the density of the air around him so they levitate, an air magical ability. People were just hovering around, passing by and up. He didn't take much notice to them, but some looked at him. He found the entrance. It was a small opening with 3 arch entrances, all of which led to the same passageway into the council room. In there he spoke to the elders of the High Council of Aeronown about ending the terraformation with the new magic prophesied to awake within the next few years. They accepted the fate that we will have to fight against the terraformation process that the Archon guard, and so Ain went on to Aquid as well, after the air nomads of Aeronown agreed to fight the Archon. There he began on the coast of Aquid, where there were buildings built all along the coastline. A great lighthouse manned the headland. A large, elaborate jetty ran out to the sea, where it reached a large auditorium-esque building, curved like a stadium. There were all manner of buildings on the inside of that building. It was the sea area of Aquid. In the centre existed gardens with seawater. In the middle of the garden area was a council building. It was a domed building in a Greek-Roman style. Inside sat the council on rings protruding from the ground. There he asked of the water users allegiance against the Archon, to which they agreed also. At this point he knew that all places were in agreement to the plan against the Archon. But hopefully they'll never be defeated, as to then never allow war against ourselves, but nonetheless stop the terraformation so the world doesn't grow any more fragile with dark magic. Soon he was in Lacidity council chambers, sitting, waiting, talking and discussing topics. They talked of how defeating the Archon is only needing to cease their terraformation, and how if kept alive they can still war against them and not each other. Then the Light Stars will never need to end existence because the Archon will remain in their still towers. They stay in the vicinity of their pyres for the most part, but do venture off into the woods from time to time, probably hunting vril. The two never liked each other, the Archon mostly enjoying toying with the humans too much to have them fall to vril oft, possibly why there was such structure within the vril clans. The vril were terrifying though. It was good sake for the humans to have the Archon hunting them, but it was never seen, just dead vril. Aim was tired. He headed home. In bed he thought of the toll the teleportation magic was taking upon him. He knew if he used dark magic too much, he knew if he used dark magic too much, he could probably summon the vril upon him, and he could barely manage to cast a spell as it was. He dozed off to sleep, and everything was sublime. Everything was calm and soothing. He felt at peace that everyone was in unison at last. Whether or not the Archon will be defeated is yet to be seen. He thought maybe that if the humans could never defeat the Archon, then they could eventually become better at magic. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to stop the terraformation, as beasts are already giant as it is, and magic is only to get more advanced. A dreamy sleep drifted over him. There was a cool air about him. He dreamt of all sorts of bizarre things, etheric in nature, lights flashing and soft velvety rays. He saw the battles of the future involving those new humans, fighting monstrous beasts conjured up by the storm, godlike animals in size and strength versus star magic wielding humans. When he awoke in the morning, his drone was looking at him. Maybe he was stirring in his sleep. Hey, greeted Ain. As he stretched, the drone went away. It seemed occupied with something. He was up talking to the drone about matters to come, wondering if the Archon would sway. The drone seemed adamant they would win. Ain knew he had something to speak to the king about. It was whether or not the Archon are training us to fight against them by elevating the state of magic as preparation for the outer space conflicts. There was an urgent stirring in his mind. He knew of the connectedness of the world. He knew out there could be great happenings, like how insects fight on the floor and now on land, how birds fly large about the air. He knew there was things stirring elsewhere that he was connected to. Ain had talked long with the elders of the different cities. He knew the ways of the world, how it was the age of air from the age of darkness. The past was once full of deceit, as per why everyone is so fearful of the oncoming humans from the past. It must be a learning experience for them as well. Crater Realmica and Hyper Realmica, where we live on a crater amongst many others that all comprise the moon, and the idea that all those craters are lit from one and the one that went away into the void. The braziers flickered in the slow wind that moved through the halls. Sunset orange and flower blue tingled the air as it moves in and out of the fires either side of the king. He moved. It was long since he'd seen Ain. His long hair flowed back, looked elven. Luscious brown hair wet from the damp rain. A few strands lowered over his face. He wore a long set of deep purple robes. The fabric rolled around his body that was lean. He was young, 24. The king was young as well, a couple years older. He had long black dreadlocks that came from his sly head. He wore a great set of hooded robes, half streetwear, half kingly attire. He held a cane in one hand that had a crystal sphere for a handpiece. What's doing? The king said. Ain replied. Something's bothering me, about how it's probably that the Archon are trying to unify with us, as why they are unifying us against them, or to go to outer space. It's probably true, said Steez. We'd be going then. Who knows what's out there, said Ain. Probably giant mantises. Probably, the king promptly replied in glee. He began to explain. It is the reason for why we live in such a magical world and cannot sit idle, Ain replied. To be giving back or to fight. Explains their materialization and ours if we're connected to beings fighting out there. Maybe one of us is this lizard lord, as a jest, for us to lead everyone out. He left. He had said all that he had needed to say to the king. He went back into town to the main tavern Density. It had a large balcony overhanging the front main entrance that he walked through. Sitting down on one of the booths to the back of the left of the entrance was a couple of his friends. He sat down with them. One of them was Nallard, a cherished friend that Ain had known for a couple of years. "Hi," he said, looking at Ain. He greeted them in return. The other one was Rich, a low-time gangster, supposedly. He was funny. They continued what they were talking about, something about girls in the street, though they knew Ain was wanting to do something. Ain spoke amongst their conversation. "So, I've been thinking of meeting an Archon and asking them to stop the terraformation." Nald looked oddly at Ain. "Seems pretentious, don't you think?" Nald rolled his glass in his hand. "I think that you will have to see the elite of the Archon to have that query answered." Ain refuted. "No, they are all the same. They will talk, trust me," he explained. "I want you two to come with me to question the Archon." The way he said it made it seem surprising that none had gone to do so yet. Probably the fear. The way he said it made it seem surprising that none had gone to do so yet. "Aren't the Archon to be feared?" questioned Nallard. But Ain adamantly described. "The Archon just sit in their pyres all day, probably just waiting for counsel." Rich said, "No, I heard they will meet you in their vicinity if you approach them. I'm sure of it." The two looked at him. Ain said, "Well, all we have to do is go out toward the nearest pyre and ask them to stop." Rich laughed. "Don't think that they won't attack you." Nala joined in. "Well, maybe if we all go, there'll be nothing to fear." Rich spoke promptly. "Sure, I have nothing to fear." Ain looked pleased. He left and went back to his place to get prepared, grabbing his sniper rifle, his submachine guns, crystals. He looked around and wondered what else he would need against an Archon. He grabbed his blade from atop his workbench and fastened it around his waist alongside his two submachine guns. He had a lot of weight on him, but he was strengthy and sturdy. He left with his drone back down toward Density and met up with Nallard and Rich. They were there and also ready. "Ready?" Nallard said to Ain, to which he repeated assuredly. Nallard had brought his drone with him. It was a basic Alpha unit drone, the one before the beta. It was armoured in gold bronze plates of bronze and its structure was strong titanium. It looked vastly similar to the beta, though it was sturdier and bulkier, less slender and agile, made more for heavier weaponry than the betas that are traditionally used as scouts or envoys. It spoke a greeting, and Ain's droid that he nicknamed B replied in some drone jargon too, always exasperating on the human's mortality. They really seemed up for anything. They were solar powered. In their bronze armor plates were solar panels that constantly took in energy from the sun. They also had backup batteries in the back of their torso for troubling, wet days. The drones also ran on crystals or mana for those who of the dark could enchant. Nallard called his drone Rangon, after the notion of halting running, Rangon, a testament to the strength of the drone being able to hold its ground. Rangon carried two dual-wielding rifles and held a large beam rifle on its back, whereas B carried just a beam rifle. Beam rifles are classic rifles designed for drones. They are essentially railguns, beaming out high charges of energy. They were also too large for humans to handle. They were designed for drone hands. The drones were on average twice as large as a typical human. Rich was looking at the ground. He doubted the mission. He wasn't eager to believe an Archon would just idly converse with them, but Ain knew better regarding the ways of the Archon. They hate war, yet are the best at it. So much power they hold, yet enact none of it, only presumes to exist as a challenge to them. They discussed some more before leaving. Ain moved his foot in the rough dirt sand outside Density and cast some hand signs, and in an instant they were in the wilderness. The wilderness is categorized as areas that are of the occupancy of the Archon. Large areas of great forests are typically the main comprise. The areas are full of the most exotic wild beasts running with magic. They aren't occupied by the humans because of the terraformation is too heavy there. Full of mythical creatures that once would have filled the imaginations of the old world pre-Archonic terraformation. Giant insects flying through mountainous trees, great eagles that camp on the highest eerie precipices of the world, magnificent wolves that move through dense jungles, The wolves spoke there. They were smart from magic. There were some who even side with the beasts of the world and live alone in the wilderness. Dazzling elk with glittering horns able to cast magic. Tigers whose stripes glow when powered with magic. Shape-shifting bear and wolfmen. Singing birds who cast spells of sleep. Parasitic fungi that causes one to become evil. Completely unbridled wilderness. All thanks to the archonic terraformation. It's the comparison of the world current to the way it used to be that made Aang question if reality was real. It's what made him envision creating it by being the best creator. All he had to do was be the best prophet, God in flesh, for the creator to copy, as he knew that the reality existed as a paradise to the toxic haven that was once the industrialized world. He knew that essentially the way the reality existed in the current was a product of the past. And in the past, the creator would have wanted to change the world so much he would rather be the best from the saved world as to know the truth free of bias. Something important was happening. For 230 years, the Archon had been slowly terraforming the Earth for the arrival of the interdimensional beings. It's probable that they never would have been able to arrive if the electromagnetic state of existence wasn't elevated through the growing of trees. And they were meant to arrive. They come here to learn about this world, to then change their world, that is the past of this world, so that their future becomes like the reality they've come to. It's canny to Aang, how he knows that he's living in a digital simulation that real people come to adventure in, but he knows he lives in the saved world and not in some industrial nightmare. What would be better? It never really concerned him. As far as he knows, the sensation he feels are real to him as they could ever get. What concerned him was the notion of beings coming to this reality, which they are supposed to learn from, and nonetheless changing it so that they lose the lessons they were supposed to learn. There were still months before the StarLore event. They were just trying their best to end the terraformation before they came, so that they don't force a fallout with the Lightsayers and cause an all-out war. The Lightsayers want the Archon and their terraformation gone before the world becomes so advanced that even with the power of the Darksayers, that they cannot destroy reality. The Darksayers want to leave the Archon alone, but they know if they do so, the same fear of the Lightsayers prevails to them also, that the equilibrium that exists will become unbalanced without the means to contravene before the Archon plunge reality into an eternal darkness of fear and suffering. They know that once the Archon are defeated, the magic that they cause will be enough to entertain them. The trees rose tall around them. The forest stood little in comparison to the jungle. The roots of the trees grew above like large buildings that had skyscrapers ascending from them. They wreathed everywhere like water. The group continued on. They were in one of the most distant areas near a pyre where Aang had been. The trees seemed to sing as they climbed so high that the leaves at the top were lost to eyes. There was damp breeze in the air that flowed through the jungle. Rich kept himself warm. He was wearing a hoodie and chino jeans. He dressed the same way as Steve, though less majestically. He carried a rifle on his back and had 2 daggers off his belt. Nald was wearing an assassin's tank top. That collar stuck up and caressed his neck and shielded his mouth and jaw. He wielded 2 blades on his back. As they walked through the forest, they noticed all manner of beasts. Some they avoided, some just passed them with no hesitance. A giant ferret passed them and looked strangely at them. It spoke to them. What a weary place for you travellers. It was twice as big as them, and its tail was the length of them all in a row. Great ferret, we seek the pyre. Will you kindly take us there? Aang asked. The ferret nodded and led them through the forest. The ferret was a brown-orange colour, and its fur had a soft tiger pattern. Its long ears stuck up and directed them. It asked them about what they were doing in the wilderness away from human civilizations to which they conversed about. Aang felt a chill. It was something odd, similar to how he would feel about prophecies. Soon they were out of the forest. They were amid a great plain. In the distance they could see the pyre. It was long and tall and black. It stuck out in the silent sky like a bright star in space. It stood in the centre of the plains that were so vast you could not see the tree line on the other side. The ferret beckoned them well and then left back into the forest. A mysterious cloud rang around the highest point of the pyres, creating an ever-present storm around the pyre. It was black as night and writhed back and forth in a slow circle. It must have been part of the terraformation, all that dark energy. The reason the Archon was so proficient in dark magic was the same for why they created the pyres. Aim wondered what disturbed him just before, a sudden doubt. He knew that something was going to happen, he just didn't know what. They wandered for hours along the plains until the ground began to grow dark, until it was black dirt beneath their feet. Everywhere was black. There were no trees, just vast black plains. The pyre stood almost the same distance as when they left the forest. There was a gap in the wind, and then an Archon appeared. It stood on the horizon. Its X-shaped figure contrasted the background. Its spike-backed limbs stretched higher in the air. It was a menacing figure. It had a full set of Arconian armor that looked like black rock. It shone in the light like obsidian. The group and the Archon began moving toward each other, lessening the distance between them. When it was close, the group could notice more defining features of it. It had great big arms and legs and a slightly hunched back. Its head was on a long neck and was like elliptical, like an egg on its side. It had two big slits for eyes that its pupils hung perpendicular to, and an alien small vertical mouth that would stretch open like a snake's. Only its eye holes were uncovered by armor. In its hands had 2 fingers and a thumb, each held a hand rifle, with each an image of a dark star on it, a pointy star-like X shape, the Arconian symbol. "Welcome," the Archon said, when it drew close enough to be heard. The group responded starkly and benevolently. "Hello, thank you for greeting us," Ain led. The Archon must have sensed the group moving towards the pyre and came to meet with them. "You know, you're getting a little out of your jurisdiction," the Archon said, to which Ain replied, "We've come to ask if you will end the terraformation on the lands." The Archon seemed to laugh. "I speak for the High Archon of this pyre, and it would only grant you an audience if you do its bidding." "What would it have us do?" Ain asked. "Uncover the shards of Arcanite that have long since fell from the sky, as an offering, to demonstrate that you have the merit to speak to the High Archon." Ain looked puzzled. He had never heard of Arcanite shards. The Archon explained, "Long has it reigned with Arcanite shards that endow the world with magic. All have been consumed by entities that have now become fell or mighty beasts. There exist mythical monsters out there powered by Arcanite shards that need to be eradicated and their crystals brought back." The Archon wavered. "Do this, and you'll be granted entry to speak with the High Archon of the pyre." Ain spoke to Nallard and Rich about uncovering the Arcanite shards, and they all agreed it was the best action considering there would be no way of them assaulting the Archon pyre. They got what they were asking for, an audience with the Archon, and now they were on track to speak to the cause of the terraformation, ear stopping it. "We will retrieve the Arcanite and bring it back here," said Ain, and the Archon teleported away. A cool wind trampled over the ground about them. "How will we find these beasts?" said Nallard. "I know where they are," said Rich. "They're in the deepest parts of the wilderness, far away from any civilization. I've heard stories of such great beasts, a giant arachnid that feasts upon life, a gold-hungry lightning drake that showers itself in its own greed." They left the den city. When they were there, they were relaxed in their usual booth and drank drinks and tasty tonics. They discussed all manner of tales of the great wicked beasts that were across the lands. "I've heard of the lightning drake that exists on the Himalayan mountains. It cowers over its gold that it collected for long, robbing villages and settlements of their plunder. It spews lightning from its mouth and speaks elegantly and about eloquent and exquisite things. I've heard of a giant arachnid that feasts upon trees that give off lights, sucking the light right through the sap. An assassin-praying mantis that lives proudly to kill others of high measure. A gem-loving raven that kills others for high-quality gems," Rich detailed. "How have you heard of these beasts?" queried Ain, to which Rich replied, "Many a time I would notice bounties for wicked beasts that plague the lands. Who knew how many shards of Arcanite there were? There must have been dozens that fell. Surely the High Archon couldn't expect all to be uncovered when there are at least several other pyres throughout the world." They agreed upon finding as much as they could. The crystals would eviscerate in the air by being consumed, only to rematerialize when they weren't being used anymore. Nalad's glass was empty. He looked down into it. I think it would be hard to defeat these beasts, but it is the only way to show the Archon that we are necessary to speak to. Ain spoke about the feeling he had exiting the forest onto the plain. He said that he fears the Interhumans who are to come here starting a civil war, the fear being that from a civil war the light stars are destroyed, leaving the dark stars without the combined power to stop the Archon from terraforming the world. The idea is that the Interhumans might be like the dark stars and want more power, so by taking out the light stars in a civil war, the terraformation would continue providing all sort of challenge, but that would plunge the world into darkness. Herein lies the problem. The people that live in this reality fear that they will never have peace because it is a game world for more realistic humans that come here to fight. Ain knew that he was doing everything that he thought he ought to given the situation. He knew he best continue unifying all against the Archonic terraformation. They were all glad that they had not had to fight an Archon, but were still tired from walking for such a long time. Not to deplete their mana by teleporting into the distance, and somewhat fatiguing them and rendering them magically inept for a possible, seemingly random real swarm.